Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Anselmi back here today with another video today over the Ming Empire and what they're doing during the era of the gunpowder and maritime empires of the 1400s. So we haven't checked in on China in a while. It's been a bit, and they've gone through a lot, but we're going to focus primarily on the period of time in Chinese history right after the fall of the Yuan dynasty. Now, if you remember from Miss Dixon's video about the Mongols, the Yuan dynasty is a Mongol dynasty, a Mongol-led dynasty of China. And the Ming are going to be the return of China to the Chinese. At least that's how they're going to see it. So in 1368, Zhu Yongzheng, also known as the Hongwu Emperor, rises to power and kicks the Mongols out of China, establishing the Ming Empire. Now, the Hongwu Emperor, in fact, Hongwu means abundantly martial. So you can already tell by his nickname of the Hongwu Emperor that this emperor of China is fastidiously Confucian in nature. He is going to be very strict and stringent on the rules, and it is his goal to really kind of get rid of the corruption and greed that he sees present in China. Now, what he's going to do to address that is establish some old practices in Chinese history. He's going to bolster the bureaucratic aspects of Chinese government. This bureaucracy, this reliance on bureaucracy, dates back all the way to the Han Chinese and perhaps even further. But under the Hongwu Emperor, China is going to see a resurgence in the civil service exam and bureaucrats or low-level government officials really taking charge in China. He's going to implement some other really draconian reforms. He is going to use secret police and killing, torturing, kidnapping, whatever he needs to do to rid China of its perceived corruption. Now, from there, his second successor, not his immediate successor, but pretty soon after he's gone, is the Yongle Emperor. I know it looks like Yongle. It's not. It's Yongle, or at least as best as my pronunciation can manage. The Yongle Emperor is Zhu Di. Now, Zhu Di is going to be one of the greats of the Ming Dynasty. Zhu Di is going to approach China's borders in a new way, or at least in a way that hasn't been seen in a while. He's going to build extraordinary things. He's going to commission extraordinary journeys. So let's look at his reign from 1402 to 1424. Now, one of his earlier acts as emperor is the construction of a new capital. Now, Beijing was a city in China at the time, but it really isn't a city until Zhu Di, or the Yongle Emperor, has it redone. It is most known for what is now known as the Forbidden Palace. The Forbidden Palace is actually a complex of 980 buildings, and it's going to be built over the course of his earlier reign, and Zhu Di is going to eventually move into the Forbidden Palace and into the Forbidden City of Beijing in 1420, and from there, this will be the seat of the Ming Dynasty and will be remain important to Chinese emperorships until the 1920s. But he is responsible for commissioning the building of the Forbidden Palace, and you can see it right there. This is a big move. He moved the capital from Nanjing to Beijing, and he did a couple of other new things too. One of the most significant changes that Zhu Di, or the Yongle Emperor, approached was the commissioning of Zheng He. Now, Zheng He was an admiral, and he served for He served for quite some time as the admiral of a flotilla, or a large collection of ships, underneath the commissioning of the Yongle Emperor. Now, Zheng He is going to go on a series of 7 exploratory journeys throughout the South China Sea, the Indian Ocean, all the way over to Africa, and even down to the Cape of Good Hope. And he's just going to do that from 1405 to 1433. Now, 1402 is when the Yongle Emperor took control of the Ming Dynasty, which means that almost immediately, right, within the first 3 years of his reign, he is doing something remarkable in commissioning Zheng He. And in fact, it is almost immediately, because it's going to take about 3 years to build the extraordinary ships that you see on the screen right now. These are, and you can see them in the background, these are Chinese treasure ships. They are 9-sailed ships. They are about 400 feet in length, about 170 feet across. These ships dwarf everything that Europe is producing at the time, and they're doing it almost 100 years before Europe makes it to the New World. Zheng He is going to travel the Indian Ocean on a mission of goodwill and peace, for all that we can tell. A lot of trade, and he's going to go as far as Persia and Calicut. So he's going to interact with the gunpowder empires that we mentioned in one of our previous videos. Calicut is in India. It's later known as Calcutta. He's going to make it as far as the Swahili coast, cities like Malindi on the eastern coast of Africa. And like I said already, he made it down past the Cape of Good Hope. He is going to travel more west than any Chinese ship, any Chinese navy has ever traveled prior. Now, a couple really cool things about Zheng He. Number one, he's actually not native Chinese. Zheng He is Muslim, and his parents are, well, before they were killed in a series of wars, they were Muslim, and Zheng He is going to be Muslim. He's going to remain devout to his faith for his whole life. But because he was captured in war in service of the Yongle Emperor, Zheng He is going to be a eunuch. A eunuch is a castrated man, typically castrated for the purposes of serving a specific position, oftentimes meant to protect or guard a queen or an empress, as you might guess. Eunuchs are going to serve a specific purpose in Chinese history. They're actually going to form their own class, and we're going to talk about them more in a second. So Zheng He is really serving a lot of different hats here, ones that we're not used to kind of seeing. But yeah, he is going to do something that China hasn't done for some time. China's going to open their doors, and they're going to go exploring. And man, do they ever do it, right? These 7 journeys that take place on and off from 1405 to 1433 are just an incredible trip through, I mean, some of the places we've been talking about. They're going to go through the Strait of Malacca and into Singapore, like we talked about in South and Southeast Asia. And they're going into India. They're going into the gunpowder empires of Persia. They're going to Africa. They are going in. And in so doing, they're doing a lot of different things. Number one, on these treasure ships, which, by the way, there are 300 ships that Zheng He is going to travel with. Not all of them are treasure ships, but he's going to travel with a flotilla of 300 ships, and somewhere in the vicinity of 25 to 30,000 men. That's about half the population of the city of London at the time, right? Taking about half the city of London, he's going to put them on ships, and taking this floating city, he's going to travel around the known world. And when he stops in places, these treasure ships are called that for a reason. They are packed to the gills with silks and porcelains and tea and other things, right, that they're going to trade and offer in tribute and use to their own ends. During this time, Zheng He is going to establish tributary kingdoms. He's going to, with this floating army, sometimes weigh in on uh, disputes going on in Ceylon, which is what we now know as Sri Lanka, off the coast of India. Right, he's gonna weigh in there, and his army is going to determine the ruler of Ceylon. He's going to do the same um, in some of the Spice Islands around the Strait of Malacca. He's going to kind of set up kingships. More than that, he's going to show up to these cities like Calicut, which are trade cities, and they are used to ships coming in and out, but no one has ever seen anything like what they're bringing. And they understand that this could be a bit of a threat, but more than anything, it's going to be a trading opportunity. And so Zheng He is going to take home enormous riches. He's going to fight pirates and have them killed on his way home, right? He's going to do all sorts of things. One of his most treasured gets in all of his journeys, right here you can see, is a giraffe. He's going to bring it back home and bring it to the Yongle Emperor. And the giraffe itself is going to be completely cherished by the emperor, as it's thought to maybe be even a good sign. Now, he's going to bring exotic animals from all over the world, exotic treasures from all over the world, and he's going to open up China's borders. Now, that sounds great. But China doesn't have a long-standing history of being really open-bordered. So what happens? Right? Well, after 1433, Zheng He dies in 1433. And by the time he dies, he's not in service to the Yongle Emperor anymore. He's in service to his successor, one of his successors. And what happens in China is what often happens in civilizations. By the time Zheng He is back, Chinese attitudes have changed towards the outside world. China has always, at least up until the Ming Empire, been steeped in Confucian ideology, which is going to insist on kind of the presence of staying here and doing what we need to here, keeping our eyes down, as it were, focused on the task at hand. Right, that's their bureaucracy. That's in their belief system. On top of that, a flotilla of 300 ships and 30,000 men is enormously expensive. There are issues going on with other cultures and civilizations. China is still combating Mongols and nomads to the north and other people all around. We're going to talk about a couple of those in a second. There is an enormous amount of infighting going on. And one of the groups that is kind of gaining popularity is the eunuchs. Now, if you remember, I said Zheng He was a eunuch himself, and so his death is going to mark kind of a chance to take some of that power away from that group. Whatever the reason, too costly, infighting, a loss of interest or appetite for looking around the outside world, the Ming Dynasty is going to shut down their exploration projects shortly after 1433. Now, that is a remarkable decision because they definitely had the means and the capability. They had the technology to potentially cross the Pacific Ocean. And if they had, they would have founded the New World, and they would have beat the entire rest of the world to it by 70 years almost. But they had a mind towards what was going on at home. It really is amazing because when Spain ends up finding the New World and then establishing colonies in South America, Spain is going to become enormously wealthy with silver. And Spain is going to use that silver to pay off its trade deficit with China because of their desire for Chinese tea and porcelain and silk. China is going to be one of the largest consumers of Spanish silver. But they could have had direct access to it themselves. No, it's not about what if in history, and it's not about why didn't they. It's more about an examination of a group and what it is that they had to deal with, and why it is that they made these decisions. Right? It's amazing what infighting can do, and how looking down can keep you from looking up and around and what's out there. They're going to struggle over this time as they fall into infighting. They're going to have several issues as they go on through their dynasty. By the end of their dynasty, towards the 1600s, they're going to get into a fight with Japan. Here is Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who is a real-life samurai. And we're going to talk about him in one of our future videos regarding the Tokugawa shogunate in Japan. Just a super interesting story. But China's going to get mired in a war with Japan over Korea, of all places, in 1592 to 1598. Right, there's Korea right there. And it's going to cause them all sorts of other issues. They're going to fall to their own infighting. That unit group is going to gain popularity and lose popularity, and it's going to be a lot of infighting, a lot of internal strife and struggle, which is going to be one of the downfalls of the Ming. Now they're going to yield to the Qing Empire, which we're going to talk about them. But really, what I wanted you to see in this short examination of the Ming Dynasty is how this dynasty that had everything, every advantage, how they made use of it, how they opened their eyes and looked around, right? And then how they spent all that money and all that time and all that energy. And what it really got them. And it got them quite a lot, right? They got a giraffe. They got some good stuff. But also how governments can sometimes be a bit short-sighted to their own situations and miss some really big opportunities when they're stuck in fighting. So that in a time period where the world is globalizing, right? The 1400s, the 1500s, in a time period where the world is globalizing, Europe is mobilizing and increasing trade. The gunpowder empires are massively successful in trade. We're going to see China start closing its doors. And this is going to be a pattern of China over time, opening and closing its doors to the world. And this is just one of those steps in the process. So this is where they are in history, and just wanted to take a second to look at them, the extraordinarily interesting people of the Hongwu Emperor, the Yongle, and Zheng He, and kind of looking at these groups. Anyway, I hope it's been helpful. I hope you have a good night. Thanks so much, and keep perspective.